Well, thank you so much. There's still some people coming in. Take your seat, please. You're in the right place here for the LIBER Winter Event. Just to start now, I will start my welcome because we have 1 hour and we have a few speakers for you and also our honored keynote speech. And of course, we want to be in time to also go to the rest of the program. So welcome very much to all of you. My name is Martine Pronk. I'm Executive Director of LIBER. And on behalf of LIBER, I welcome so many of you here. I think already this is a great success. And of course, we also thank our hosts here and the host team that organized this LIBER event together with us. You're here for the 2nd edition of the LIBER Winter Event with the theme this year, Come Together, Enabling Collaboration and Inclusivity in Research Libraries. And it's my honor to introduce first, before we go to the keynote speech, 3 speakers. First of all, I would like to introduce to you Professor De Oes, who is president of the European University Institute since 2016. Prior to this, he held the Jean Monnet Chair of European Law and Policy Studies at Sciences Po in Paris, where he also founded the Center for European Studies. I won't announce his whole career, give you the time to give us your welcome. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all on behalf of the EUI. I'm sure that, like many of our visitors, you've been impressed by the beauty of the facilities in which we hosted. This is all courtesy of the Italian government that made these beautiful premises available to the Institute. It might be appropriate perhaps for me to explain a bit about who we are and what we do, because yes, we are an institution of higher education, but we are unlike any other one. And it may be of interest, since you are research librarians, to understand the kind of beast you're confronted with, which is in many respects similar to your own, but in some key aspects also very different. The EUI was created as an international institution by the then member states of the European communities almost 50 years ago. The key point to understand what we are is indeed our international origin. You see that if you look outside of our buildings, where we proudly have deployed the flags of our member countries, as all international organizations do, but more importantly, you will see that when you will meet the people here at the EUI, because we have a community that is deeply transnational. I mean, in the last count I was provided with, one counted no less than 91 different nationalities represented in the Institute. And the nationality that is most represented, which, surprise, surprise, happens to be Italy, well, it accounts for less than 10% of the total. So we are a deeply transnational institution, and that affects really the whole of our work, since we bring together people of different origins. I know that universities attach great importance to internationalization, and that some universities in Europe are deeply internationalized. I used to operate in one institution that has indeed been utterly transformed by this internationalization process during my time there. But the point is that at the EUI, there is no dominant culture. We're all part of, let's say, loosely shaped transnational culture, which is, of course, a source of great wealth, intellectually speaking, but at times of small little challenges, because words do not mean the same thing to every one of the members of our community. Be that as it may, another specific feature of the Institute is the fact that it is much more focused than most universities in Europe. We are specialized in the social sciences and humanities, and also we've been told very clearly by our founding members that we should try not simply to do as all other universities do, but perhaps to focus on things that are less developed in national universities. That's why our very first degree, for instance, was created as a doctoral degree, which at the time did not even exist in all our member countries. And today, the training of early-stage researchers remains a key mission of the Institute. We have the largest doctoral program in the social sciences and the humanities in Europe, and the largest postdoc program in the social sciences and humanities as well, which makes, of course, this institution as, let's say, a somewhat unique creature compared to its national counterparts. But if you talk about a PhD and a postdoc program, you talk about research. And since I'm talking to research librarians, I couldn't omit the fact that most of the people, most of the scholars you will meet here in the Institute are research focused. This is helped by the fact that we have no undergraduate program, of course. But it also means that we have a strong focus on developing really challenging research program, frontier research in the sense of the European Research Council, which is a great supporter of the Institute, which happens to be one of the most successful institutions in presenting applications for funding by the ERC, but also a lot of applied research, because having been created as a European institution, we naturally have developed all sorts of ties with the world of policy making, notably in Brussels. Now, the key in all these activities, because as you will see, we're a small institution, eventually much smaller than any of your universities, I would bet. The key to understand the way we operate is that we are a networked institution, by which I simply mean that there is no way for us to operate locking ourselves up in the beautiful surroundings of this building. We need to rely on the input, the support, intellectually speaking at least, and the advice of our peers in all the compartments of our activity. And that, of course, includes our library, which is why our library has always been a proud member of your consortium. And believe me, together with Pep, we have been talking about gathering the members of the LIBER community at the Institute for a number of years. It was made difficult by all sorts of things, the main one being, of course, COVID. But I'm very happy that we have at last succeeded in this endeavor. I'm sure it will be a source of great benefit intellectually from all the members of our library staff to be able to exchange with you and benefit from your views on the many changes affecting your work. And I do hope that these conversations will not simply be an occasional event, but really part of longer and deeper teamwork in which you will all gain the, let's say, the skills, additional skills that will make all of us more efficient in our respective work. So thank you very much for coming all the way to Florence. We know that at this time of the year it may be quite adventurous, but I hope you will be rewarded by the quality of the discussions that you will have here. Thank you very much, and I wish you an excellent conference at the EUI.
Thank you so much, Professor Roos. Unfortunately, you won't be able to stay with us all day, so in your own words, you will sneak out in a minute. The second speaker I would like to introduce is Julien Roche, our LIBER president and also director of the Libraries and Learning Center at the University of Lille. Julien, please.
Dear President, dear colleagues and friends, I'm very happy to be here today. I will keep it very short because we have a long day, and I want to start at a short notice the real content of these 2 days. First, I would like to warmly thank EUI for welcoming us here in Fiesole, because, of course, you mentioned that we have connections very strong between what you are in EUI and what we are in LIBER. And the interesting thing you mentioned in your speech was EUI is, on top of everything, a network. And this is exactly what LIBER is also. So it's very relevant for us to be here today. So thank you very much for welcoming us. It's a wonderful place. It's a wonderful venue. I had the privilege to come before for our events here in Fiesole, and but for some colleagues, I know it's the first time here in UI. So I hope you will really enjoy the location and the content of what happens here. I would like also to thank Pep and his team, because we had the project, and you mentioned that, Mr. President, in your speech, to come for many years now to organize something here. It was not obvious and not easy to organize a LIBER conference because the LIBER conference is very large. But now we find the opportunity to do that with the winter event. So it's very fortunate, and I'm very thankful to you, Pep, and behind you, to all your team. Some of people of your team are in the room. I don't know all the names, but I know you've been very busy preparing that. I would like also to thank the LIBER office, of course, and especially Angela. It doesn't mean that it's only Angela who did everything, but I know that she's been very, very busy to organize things, and if things went smoothly between EUI and LIBER, that's also because of what she did and what all the office did under the leadership of Martin. What I would like also to say here is just to mention very quickly what is the LIBER Winter Event compared to what we do in LIBER at other times during the year. You probably all know it, but we have a general conference beginning of July. It's between 400 and 500 people. The winter event is very different from the LIBER conference. The LIBER conference, it's a global networking conference, not only in Europe, because we have a lot of colleagues coming from the rest of the world, especially from Northern America and so on, and it's a scientific conference. We have a double-blind reviewing process with presentations and so on. So there is no real opportunity to go very deep in what LIBER is during the conference. I mean, networking among the members. Networking among the members, it's the winter event. It's what we will do today. So we are a bit more than 100, and the people who are really at the heart of this event are the people who are working in the working groups, the chairs of working group, the members of working groups, and the LIBER members. It's an all-internal event we are having today. So I'm very thankful to you for being here, because as I always say, the LIBER president, the LIBER board is nothing without the energy you as LIBER member spend to support LIBER activity, to create the network, and to make sure that the ideas, the projects, the lessons learned, and so on circulate through Europe and through the different libraries. So thank you very much for being here. Thanks again to EUI for welcoming us, and I wish you a very nice stay here in Fiesole and a very nice 2 days winter event here in EUI.
Thank you, Julien. And lastly, I would like to give the floor to Pep Thorn, Director of the Library and Information Technology Services here at EOI. Pep.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, presidents. Well, I hope that everybody feels welcome to the European University Institute in Florence at this stage. We know, as everybody has said, that it's not difficult to feel welcome when we are surrounded by such so much beauty. But still, we have done our best to make these 2 days comfortable and productive retreat for you, apart from being just a beautiful memory postcard. Having been welcomed by President De Hoes and the conference being opened by President Julien Brochet, my only role before we start, our duty as librarians, is basically to express my gratitude. First of all, to LIBER for allowing us to organize the winter event in Florence. We feel honored to have been chosen for this very important European meeting. Secondly, I would like to thank President De Hoes and the Secretary General of the European University Institute, Marco Del Panta, who cannot be present today due to a last-minute issue, for their full support from the very first moment I expressed my interest in organizing a LIBER meeting. It has come at the very last, very close to the end of your term, President, but I'm very happy, I'm very glad it happened during your leadership at UI. That everything is ready for today and that everything goes well these 2 days is the result of a team effort of the European University Institute team, library team. There are many librarians who remain invisible to all of you, but as Antoine de Saint-Exupéry said, the essential is invisible to the eyes. So I would like to express also my gratitude to the several librarians that will not show up, that are covering in this very moment shifts, attending meetings, working with users, everything that we librarians do actually, but they cannot be physically here. So thank you very much to my library team. Still special thanks to Vanessa, Nuria, Zeli, Teresa, Alma, Megan, and Sarah, who will assist you during the conference. And a very, very special thanks to Monica Stelletti and Janet McGuinness, who have been working shoulder to shoulder with the LIBER team to make this conference possible. Thank you very much, and welcome again to the European University Institute.
Thank you, Pep. And now, dear guests, dear delegates, I would like to invite Sarah Nouwen to the stage and introduce you. Sarah Nouwen is Professor of Public International Law since September 2020, and she will give the keynote speech today with the title Inclusive Open Access in Academia Coming Together Against Exclusive Publishing. I won't give away anything else because she's going to explain to us what her point is in the keynote. Sarah, go ahead.
I won't start with thank yous because I think you've had plenty of those. Come Together. I think it's a brilliant title for this conference and in fact any conference, given the origins of the word conference, conferre, bringing together. The primary purpose of this event is, of course, to bring together research librarians, and it's therefore a great privilege for me, a total outsider, to be invited to address you. I know libraries only by using them, and I'm afraid I only know a very small part of everything you offer. And I know librarians mostly as the most friendly people that one can find in any university. But that's about it. So being invited to give a keynote is also a bit daunting. So how would art historians react if I were standing here and give them a lecture about Florence? Or pastry chefs if I were giving them the lecture about how to make the perfect panettone? Or midwives if I were going to give them a lecture about the experience of childbirth? All topics I have some experience with, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert, let alone speak to the experts about it. The reason why I nonetheless accepted this invitation to be with you and to discuss with you is because of the second part of the title, enabling collaboration and inclusivity in research libraries. Because I think what is required, and I think also the spirit of the invitation by the organizers was that what is required is collaboration beyond librarians. And it is in that spirit that I will be sharing some thoughts today, mostly agenda points for discussions. Nothing what I will be saying is going to be a huge lesson for you or anything, but more what are the topics on which we can collaborate. So the topic I've chosen is open access, and for two reasons, both of which relate to the theme of the conference. First of all, coming together. Open access seems to be a fantastic topic for people to come together. Readers want open access because there's nothing as frustrating of having found your article and then discovering this paywall. Authors want open access because after having spent blood, sweat and tears on an article, you want the world to know and not only those who can afford it. Journal editors want open access because they have invested so much in curating a beautiful journal and they want everybody to enjoy it. Librarians want open access because they don't want to pay hefty prices for content for which the producers of that content have been paid by public money. Publishers want open access because they can no longer patrol the internet and make sure, and they no longer can control where the knowledge is going. And in a university that I recently visited during Open Access Week, all students who entered the building were given a piece of cake to celebrate the fact that 90% of the scholarship had been produced that year. It was open access. So students too love open access. In other words, open access, who can be against it? Everybody rallies around the theme of open access. However, the fact that everybody likes it may also be a reason for the alarm bells to go off. In the area in which I work, mostly in international law, peace negotiations, international criminal justice, we have similar concepts that everybody seems to love. Nobody is against justice. Nobody is against peace. But as I've argued with Sharat Srinivasan in an article or in a book chapter, for millennia, human societies have had a vocabulary for peace. Yet the meaning of peace has never been common or consistent. We might understand peace as an essentially contested concept. Concepts, the proper use of which inevitably involves endless disputes about their proper uses on the part of their users. On an optimistic view, the absence of an agreed definition of peace is productive for resolving specific disputes, as invoking peace serves as a means of obtaining verbal consensus. It is hard to be all out against peace. On a more pessimistic view, one sees that conflicting ideas concerning what peace should be can actually become a source of conflict. Now, the reason why I cite this is that I think perhaps the same may be true for open access. The term is productive because it allows us to achieve verbal consensus. It is hard to be all out against open access. But that verbal consensus may also obscure actual disagreement and the reasons therefore. Worse, the verbal consensus on the importance of open access without exploring what we actually mean by it could lead us to enter into an open access world that works against the objectives of what many thought open access was all about. Therefore, I think open access is really a topic around which we need to come together to discuss. The second reason to choose open access is that it's also a topic that illustrates the need for collaboration. The second part of the title of your event. So, yes, it requires collaboration among librarians. And I was inspired by the keynote address that many of you will have heard in Budapest earlier this year by Chris Burke, where she told the story about how small librarians had taken on mighty publishers in negotiations in order to advance the open access agenda. And she really called for collaboration among librarians. But I think her speech also illustrated the need for collaboration beyond librarians and with faculty members. She said, libraries took on all the burdens of scholarly communication without requiring faculty to change their practices. And by signing the big read and publish agreements, we are relieving the faculty from responsibility for changing their behavior. She referred to faculty as this barrier. Now, I'm sure she's right. You know, we academics, we faculty members, we're preoccupied with our research. It's already difficult enough to get that research published, let alone then change your practices about how to publish. But today I want to suggest that there may be other reasons, better reasons, for some reluctance. And that is not about the idea of open access, because I mentioned everybody loves the idea of open access, but it's more about the modalities. So I thought let's go into some of those. So the plan for the rest of the minutes that I have, first some words about, so what do we talk about when we talk about open access? And illustrating, I think, this how we all agree about the idea, but not so much on the modalities. Then some of the doubts that some members may have, and then some points for discussion. But before I go there, I should explain my perspective. I am a faculty member who tries to publish, and I try to write. Although I usually feel that I'm more talking about research and publishing than actually doing it, but that's my problem. The perspective I primarily bring today is that of an editor-in-chief of quite a big international law journal. You see the journal, and that is, that we edit, the traditional journal, but we usually refer to EJIL, the European Journal of International Law, not just as a journal, but as an ecosystem. It has a journal, it has a podcast, it has a blog with at least one and sometimes 2 or 3 posts per day throughout the year. We have an EJIL Live video series with interviews with authors, but also current affairs, scholars. The same is true for the podcast, all kinds of types of podcasts, and a social media presence. Now, what you'll understand immediately is that this is an ecosystem that needs, to do all of this, needs resources. The editors-in-chief get nothing for their work, at least not from the publisher or from the journal. We're doing this during our, in my case, EUI time. So President de Hoes is paying my time for this. But we do need resources to keep this going. We need resources for the management of the pipeline, for the people who do all the communications with all the authors. Because, if you include, 3 blog posts per day, it's a massive system. For the technical stuff about getting all these articles online, for the technical stuff of the podcast, the video series, all of these things require some resources. So now the thing that I should say is what is special, I think, about EJIL compared to other journals is we're independently owned. So we have a contract with OUP, and OUP takes care of our dissemination and of course all the technicalities, but we after every number of years, we renegotiate the contract and could theoretically go and perhaps practically go elsewhere. But that also means that in that position, we're really thinking through open access and its consequences. Because we're concerned, and I will touch upon that later on, the consequences of open access in terms of inclusion, equity, as to who can publish, but also being independently owned, without, and being a non-profit, we don't want to make profits. Everything goes back into this ecosystem, but we do need some resources to keep the ecosystem running. So it's really thinking through, as journal editors, not just about what are good articles to publish, but what is an equitable system for funding this operation. So that is the perspective I will be coming from. Okay. So what do we talk about when we talk about open access? Now, the wonderful thing in this audience, I don't have to explain, I think, the difference between green, diamond, gold, platinum, open access. You know these terms better than I do, and probably you're going to correct me at some stage. But the point I want to make is that everybody can agree upon the open access at the level of principle. Scholarship should be freely accessible, but far less so on the modalities. And I think Chris Burke's lecture also can serve as an illustration, Because as I mentioned, she started with saying how the librarians had taken up this fight with the mighty publishers and don't want to pay hefty prices for subscriptions, but then also spoke out later in that talk against hefty authors' processing charges. Now, so in her view, that is not compatible with open access. At the same time, the publishers, in conversations with publishers, they usually say, well, green open access is not real open access. Real open access is gold open access. In other words, author processing charges and transformative agreements. So here we have two people using the term open access, but what is the real open access for one is problematic for the other and kind of in violation of the spirit of open access for the librarian. A second example I want to give you is about the difference between open access and free access. So in EGIL, we have been committed to the idea of open access long before the whole open access movement started to gain traction. And what we did is we negotiated in the agreement with OUP that all EGIL articles are free access after 1 year. So online, immediately, for everybody in the world, free access. But of course, there's the issue. It's not total open access because it is only after 1 year. That said, for many of our articles, at least in every issue, we make 1 or 2 articles immediately free access. Now, if I think about those articles, from my perspective, they come very close to open access in the sense of if open access is about access for readers not to pay and to read material. However, as you know better than I do, it doesn't count as open access because it doesn't come with the same rights as what open access gives. Namely, open access gives the right also freely to reuse and in some cases even commercially exploit. And I understand that that is important for some disciplines. So in the hard sciences where it's all about experiments and reproducibility and data, perhaps that's really important. I don't understand why in other disciplines, and particularly I would say here at EUI, social sciences, law, history, that is so important. Because in a way, everything one wants to do with an article, one can do with free access. One can download it, one can print it, one can comment on it, one can quote it. There's not much that the difference between that open access gives one deviates in a sense from what free access already gives you. So why is one then supposed to give open access? Now, the only thing that I've seen happening, and I think that's hugely problematic, is that it can actually undermine academic work in the following way. Think about edited collections. Edited collections often take years and years and years of work for an editor to bring all these chapters together. Various rounds of giving comments and curating back and forth. Now, the good thing is that nowadays lots of people can put their chapters in the repositories, green open access, and at least these horribly expensive edited collections are now readable for everybody in the world because of green open access. That's good. The problem is that the moment that one starts giving commercial licenses that are for exploitation, so that allow for commercial exploitation, because these processes take so long, commercial publishers elsewhere in the world can just grab a few of these chapters, put them together, publish it as a book, without even waiting for the real publisher who has commissioned it all to put it together and to do that work. So I think this is undermining the work of the editors who are carefully for years patiently doing this work. So my question is, should we differentiate or actually consider that sometimes free access may be at least serve the purposes of open access, the aims that we have in mind, and in some instances be even better. So here I see a key role for librarians. First of all, librarians, I think, research librarians are key in communicating what open access is. I mean, you do a lot of the work of informing, for instance, researchers about how to do it. And I think here it's really important to keep differentiating between the idea and the modalities so that we can always assess whether the modalities actually fulfill the idea. And secondly, research librarians are key in negotiating with publishers. And here I thought that Chris Burke's argument about drawing up principles that these contracts have to comply with is an inspiring one. And my question to you is, do you know whether that is common practice, and how much is this enforced and followed? Because in that way, I think we can see with each and every contract whether it doesn't just mention the name open access, but is actually compatible with the ideals that underpin the entire move to open access. So let's now go to those ideals. The key aims that are often mentioned when it comes to open access are equity and inclusion. Now, equity, one often gets the impression it's a really difficult concept, also in law and philosophy, but from librarians I get the impression that at the minimum is that that publishers shouldn't make these enormous profits out of work that is actually paid for by others. So that's, I think, the minimum requirement. And then we get much more to equity and diversity and inclusion, because I think you can also argue that the inclusion agenda is part of the equity agenda. But if you evaluate the currently dominant open access model in light of those aims, we can immediately see that the modalities are problematic in achieving them. Because, as you know, the dominant model now is the author pays model. And I know it used to be the reader pays for reading, now it's the author pays for publishing. And I know in practice the same thing, because libraries pay, you know, in both models in practice. But it's important to look at the different principles that underpin it, because it's exactly for those people who don't have access to a good library or a well-resourced library that this shift from reader pays to author pays makes an enormous difference. Because then the question becomes, can authors still publish their work? Now, we have seen that this shift from reader pays to author pays model has, for many publishers, not led to a reduction in profits. Universities have not started paying less to publishers. Indeed, even when accounting for inflation, many universities are every year paying more to publishers. And this morning I read a headline in El País, and I haven't read the underlying research articles, but the newspaper article said, scientists paid large publishers over $1 billion in 4 years to have studies published with open access. So this was with respect to, I think, 4 large publishers. And another quote from that article, the scientific community of just 6 countries, US, China, UK, France, Netherlands, and Norway, pays over $2 billion each year to publish their work with a dozen of publishers. So the first aim of this idea of reducing the profits of publishers and making it more equitable in that sense has clearly not worked. So what do we need to do? I think this whole model of APCs and transformative agreements could be made more equitable if adjustments, let me go back one point. This is about the profit story. In that sense, it hasn't worked. Now, what about the inclusion? There is a risk that the open access for all readers becomes access closed for some authors. And those are the authors who do not have access either to their personal grants with which to pay for the publication of their research, or to well-endowed research libraries who have transformative agreements. And that is also the bitter part of it, that the great thing of the drive of open access is one of the key arguments is that parts of the world that currently have to pay for reading and cannot pay for that can now finally consume knowledge. But at the same time, that part of the world may be excluded from participating in the production of knowledge because of this system. So we need adjustments. And I think one of the key questions should be, when concluding transformative agreements, is whether the publisher has an APC waiver scheme. And some countries now, or some publishers now have that, often limited to a particular list of developing countries, but that list is pretty narrow. And there may be many more people, also in the global north, who cannot pay the APCs or do not have access to transformative agreements. The second thing I think to consider when concluding these agreements is whether the publisher has a scheme on a journal-by-journal basis, an APC waiver scheme, or across the board. And I would argue it's really important that they have a waiver scheme across the board, not looking for which journal specifically. The reason is the following. If it is going to be journal by journal, each and every journal will feel immediately in its financial balance sheet when it's giving waivers, and it may affect the sustainability of the journal. And there is a risk that this will influence, entirely undesired by the editors, but editorial decision making. Because if a journal is concerned about its financial sustainability, it cannot waive too many fees. And then it becomes editorial decision making on the basis of where people are coming from. Editors don't want to do this. But it is impossible to build a kind of hard wall between these two worlds, because editors are academics who know the transformative agreements landscape. So that's why I'm arguing that ideally, whenever one concludes a transformative agreement with a publisher, that publisher should have a general fee waiving scheme in place for people who can't afford to publish otherwise. And it should be across all journals and not immediately directed to the individual balance sheet of a journal. And I can say that with some non-commercial publishers, academic publishers, there are huge differences in this setup. So some have a general waiver scheme, others have it journal by journal. Okay, second point of the doubt. It's not only about who gets published, it's also about what gets published. Even in well-resourced universities, and I would say, I think, including this one, the amount available for APCs is limited. So you have transformative agreements, and then there's some extra money for publishing outside the transformative agreements. And this will lead to certain policies about what gets published. Now, it has always been the case that on CVs, some people valued some type of scholarship more than others. You know, it used to be the monograph in our field, now it's the big article. And the case note, you know, an annotation on the legal case, or a book review, perhaps don't count as much. But authors were at least always free to publish also those genres of academic writing. The question that arises now we move to an APC world is, are those who are sitting on the funds also paying for that kind of scholarship? And if not, is that kind of scholarship going to disappear? So I've mentioned the doubts from the perspective of equity and inclusiveness. Now, a final one I want to raise is that of the sustainability. Because as editors, many editors at the moment are torn. They are editors of either closed journals or hybrid journals. And of course, we should be moving to fully open access. But the key question is this shift sustainable? A first question is, what is the post-transformation vision? Are libraries going to continue to pay once everything is fully open access? And if so, for what? Libraries have rightly and fantastically taken on this fight against the big commercial publishers for these incredible profits that they're making. But are they willing to pay for these costs that I referred to in the beginning or not? And I think a key of the uncertainty is that it's not clear who is willing to pay for what. And it would be good if there's more transparency on the side of the publishers, of course, but also a clear indication from libraries as to what they're willing to pay for and what not. The second, or the challenge I think that a lot of journals now have is the question, are we going to flip from hybrid to full? Financially, for most journals in my field, that is absolutely not possible. The income from APCs would be about 1/10 or 1/7 compared to the other type of income. And from many perspectives, so the publishers are saying, no, but the direction of travel is clear. You need to go fully open access. And then they say, well, it may not be financially sustainable with your current model, but what you need to do is you need to publish more. Just publish more, and you regenerate the revenue for you generate the revenue for APCs, but you also justify being still behind the paywall for some other articles. But I want to ask you, do you think that this is a good development? So publishers tell me one of the reasons why we want you to publish more is that librarians tell us they want more money for, or more worth for their money by seeing more articles published. As a journal editor, I don't see my role as publishing more and more and more and more and more. Everybody can publish everything they want on the internet, on SSRN, on other platforms. The role of a journal editor is to curate, is to select. It's even more important, now everything is on the internet, that we select a few things and say, this is what you must read. And for that, we first put in an enormous amount of work to help an article in one particular stage develop to another level through rounds and rounds and rounds of editing. That's the work of a journal. But I don't see the work of a journal as publishing more and more and more and more and more. And I think this pressure to publish more, this pressure for quantity can actually undermine the quality. And so the question for you is, in your negotiations with publishers, do you want to insist, and is it actually true, on insisting on publishing more? Okay. The other reason why it's difficult at the moment to take the decision of going from hybrid to full is that it's so uncertain that this is actually the right direction. As I read out these newspaper articles from this morning, but more in general, there's more and more questions about the current dominant model. So economists have been calculating that it's actually a more equitable model to have green open access combined with modest subscription rates. Perhaps that is then a direction of travel. The point I want to make is that if journals are currently reluctant, that may be because they are taking a hugely risky choice for going fully open access, and actually the direction of travel may be in a totally different way, also from an equity perspective. The other thing I would like you to reconsider is whether hybrid journals are not so bad after all. I know that research councils and also libraries are saying, well, hybrid journals is double dipping by the publishers. But it all depends on how much they dip, right? If they dip a bit for reading and a dip for publishing, it's not so bad as long as you don't pay too much. And I think for a lot of journals, hybrid at the moment allows them to enable everybody in the world still to publish, even if they don't have access to transformative agreements and to APCs, and other people to publish open access if they do have such resources. So perhaps it's not so bad. Diamond open access is often presented as the panacea, but of course diamond open access requires journal editors or the owners to become full-time fundraisers. And the question is this a sustainable model? What I would suggest, one thing to think about, is perhaps we should come up with all librarians together with the research councils, a kind of diamond open access platform funded by the libraries, funded by the research councils, instead of these APCs. So then it's directly libraries and research councils funding the operational costs that I mentioned in the beginning of journals and putting everything online with no payment for the author and no payment for the readers. Okay, so here I've listed, I'm not going to summarize them, but the kind of key questions I've raised for you today. And the whole aim of this talk was to say that open access is no closed matter, and if you like, with a few other journal editors, we've written an editorial about this, which is available here. And you can also Google it, and you'll find it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. If you have a few more minutes, because we have time for a few questions. Is there anyone here in the room who would like to ask a question to Sarah? Yes, Erna. I give you the microphone.
Yes, first of all, thank you for this excellent presentation, and it really raises very good questions that we as librarians really need to go into. You were saying with one of the last slides that publishers just want to publish more and more and more. And what is the view of librarians on that? Well, we definitely do not want that. As editors, we just go for the quality, which is very important, and that is also the very good work that you're doing as an editor. And we definitely don't want to be published more and more and more, because then the only one who is winning are the publishers, because as soon as it's published more, then they will raise the price of the yearly licenses. So that is definitely not what they want. So please, as an editor, keep resisting the publisher who wants you to publish just more and more and more. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that, Sarah?
Well, you may have questions. I don't have many answers, so I had only questions actually for you. So many thanks for that point. I think the key point I would like to make, because of this interest in open access, I've now been talking to quite a lot of publishers, and there's such a difference in how they approach this. And some of them are really more university presses with a university mindset, and they really think about the equity, and they want to do things. But there are also other university presses, and they're still university presses. They are from universities and should have that mindset, but they run like Elsevier. So I think that's why we can't differentiate between university press and commercial publisher. We really need to think at the underlying logics within each individual press. And that's why I get back to you. When you negotiate these contracts, and I know that's not you individually, it's always collectives, but please really look at the individual publisher, whether what they are doing is equitable. But thanks for your point. We will come together on this matter.
Thank you. I have another question here. I forgot to ask. Can you please say your name and where you're from first before you have your question?
Okay, thank you. Maria Cassella, Italy, University of Turin. Thank you for your keynote. First of all, I was formerly part of a LIBER Open Access Working Group. And a couple of years ago, I don't remember now exactly, LIBER published 5 principles for libraries to negotiate with libraries. So this is important. I wanted to stress this. Secondly, yes, I agree with the colleague, because I wanted to make the same observation, really. It's not librarians who want that publishers increase publishing, but it's publishers and authors as well, because they need more journals to publish, because the number of authors is also increasing. We have many authors coming from outside Europe, outside the United States, from Asia, for example, or from Africa, who need to publish in scientific journals. No, that is the real problem. And you, as a publisher, can, of course, try to limit. And you're right when you say you curate. But it's not our problem. It's a problem of scientific communication, generally speaking. And then last observation, I think that authors don't want open access. I mean, a minority of authors want open access. They are not aware of the advantages, they don't care, they don't know how much libraries pay for transformative agreements, they just publish. They publish open access and they benefit from open access. Many of our authors, many of our faculty, they simply don't know that libraries are paying for open access, and that is also a problem because it is so easy, so smoothly to publish in transformative agreements. That's it.
I would like to react to one aspect. So I think you're right that there are authors want to publish more. I think the fact that authors from Asia, from Africa also want to publish in journals where they traditionally didn't publish in is excellent. I'm really happy about that because it enhances this diversity and it enhances knowledge, it enhances perspectives. I think that for me the bigger issue is that we don't want to start publishing stuff that we otherwise would have rejected. And that is, with this just publish more articles, that means that you kind of are starting to lower the bar a bit because you need to fill more issues. And we think that, for instance, one eJournal with 4 issues per year is more value than one eJournal with 10 issues per year if the bar has been lowered for those 10 issues.
Thank you. Final question.
Thank you. My name is Hilde van Wijngaarden. I'm from the Free University of Amsterdam. Thank you very much for giving us this faculty perspective. That's so important. And I have a question. I really like your final suggestion to move a diamond ecosystem of publishing online. How can we work together to repurpose our budgets to finance that way of publishing? Earlier you said our librarians, our libraries willing to pay for these operational costs. Yes, any day I would want to pay for these operational costs if my university would let me. And if we can set this up together internationally. So how can we make that move together?
I would say a few LIBER conferences and you're done. Huh? You've worked it all out. I don't know. But by the way, I want to thank you for the cake. It was at the Free University, I think, that we got the cake. No, but I think there are examples. So in Brazil, apparently, they were working that way. And I think, you know, if the European Union is about anything, it's about collaboration, putting money into collective things. So this could be a beautiful European Union platform where we all bring European Union research money together, and instead of paying Elsevier, we're paying this platform. So I think it's in your hands. I trust that you will network so much here that you get it done. But if they manage, I mean, they manage in Brazil, let that be an inspiring example. Of course, there's one language here. We've got all kinds of language things, but the European Union has overcome language barriers before. So I think this can be done.
Thank you so much. As a guardian of the time, unfortunately, no, you're perfectly fine. I would deeply want to thank you for this very inspiring keynote that you gave. And I saw many more questions in the room, which means that you actually touched something in our audience as well. And one of the wrap-ups I can give maybe also from the questions that the theme of this winter event, come together and collaborate, we're maybe at the start, and we may want to collaborate much more, and we may want to listen to each other much more from different perspectives to actually come together somewhere in the middle and make this work, make this open access work. Sarah, thank you so much for this. I hope you can stay a little bit with us for the break. I will have some announcements for you, so stay seated. But first, big thank you for Sarah.